What's up, guys? Good afternoon and welcome to Long Hollow. My name is Andrew, and hanging out with me this afternoon, I have Mr. Andy Williams. We like to call him Haystack or Treadneck here on staff. Yeah. And then we got Miss Julie Woodruff. So how are y'all doing?
Great.
Julie, you going to talk in your mic?
Doing well, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So, hey, as everybody's kind of tuning in, we're going to give them a second. Let's break down yesterday for a minute. Yesterday was a crazy day here at Long Hollow. Julie was just talking about all the things she hates about hosting with me pre-service. We might talk about that. But, Andy, I want to hear about yesterday morning because you may not know what yesterday morning looked like for us. It was wild.
So, yesterday morning, I'm driving to the church. I think it was like 4:50
in the
on
morning.
My phone. Yes. And I get a text message, hey, electricity's out at the church. It's been out since 12 o'clock
or something
like that. We need to go ahead and start planning what we're going to do off-site. And so we get to the church and volunteers are starting to show up, and there's no lights, there's no electricity here at Long Hollow.
Right.
So
what was the plan? We were going to, what were we 18 minutes away from doing?
So we were 18 minutes away from, so we had the plan of doing like a short service offsite at the Brooke Volan's house.
Yeah,
so
backyard.
One of our worship leaders in her backyard. And so we were just going to I think we were going to kind of treat it, I think we were going to cancel, weren't we?
Yeah. So we were going to stream one service from her backyard because we had no other choice because we had no electricity here. We were 18 minutes away from making that call. And then all of a sudden the lights came on.
We're sitting outside.
Praise the Lord.
And we're literally fixing to send our production team to Brooke's house to set up stuff. And all of a sudden we see lights like on the outside thing.
And we had church, y'all. It was awesome.
It was awesome.
So Julie, you said that you were just mentioning all the things you hate about hosting with me. Can we just talk about that for a second? I just want everybody else to experience what I have to experience. When the camera's not rolling.
I hate not knowing where to look.
Oh, okay.
That's a little awkward. Like right now, it's just like, what do you do? Yes, and every single time you say, and I've got Julie Woodruff. Julie, how are you today? I'm well. Andrew, how are you doing today?
You're like, first service makes sense, but the second two feels
exactly.
weird.
It didn't,
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
I can't imagine. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm nervous being on set with Andrew.
Why?
You should be.
Just because.
Oh, my goodness.
You just never know.
I took a cue from you today.
Here's the thing.
I've never worn a hat.
I know what we're talking about, or what I hope we're talking about.
Right.
There's a part of me that thinks that Andrew has another plan. So,
you always have to have a plan B. Always have a plan.
And his plan B is always ragging on whoever he's with. It's just always. That's exactly right.
Okay, last funny story from yesterday. If you go back and watch first service yesterday, if you go on Facebook, you can actually find it. While Julie and I are hosting, you kind of see the gathering area behind us, and up above my head is like this bridge. And we have two greeters up there. And every Sunday here on campus, we have police officers here who are here like paid security, and they're awesome. We have a lot of fun. But behind my head, you see two of the greeters fall to the ground and start rolling. And nothing was wrong. They were just trying to see if security was like on their toes. So they act like they were passing out, and it just so happened to be live.
You have a grown man, just like fall over,
who is on staff with us. I won't say his name, Dwayne Trapp. So, anyways, moving on.
Did they respond? Did the first responders?
No, they didn't. Anyways, let's talk about why we're here today. You're officially logged in. Thank you for hanging out with us today. So here's the thing. We have a new mission statement here at Long Hollow. I'm going to ask Andy to say it. Andy, you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
What is it?
Living out our God-given calling as we follow Jesus and make disciples every day.
Come on.
You got it, Andy.
Yeah. You got it. Okay, so that's great. That's great to have a new mission statement. How do we live that out? Is the question that a lot of people have asked, and the question that I'm asking. Therefore, Pastor's been walking us through this series called The Everyday Disciple, where he's simply walking through traits that we should have as a disciple. So as a member, as an attendee, as somebody who comes to Long Hollow, we want you to be these things. We feel like God wants you to be these things as a disciple of Jesus. So week 1 was a what?
Spirit-led follower.
Spirit-led follower. Good job. Week 2?
Intentional friend.
All right, so this week we're talking about being a humble guide, okay? So when we talk about being a humble guide, sound like I said a humble God, humble guide, we're talking about discipling people. We're talking about entering into these discipleship-type relationships. And I don't know about you, but when I first learned what discipleship was, I was overwhelmed. I didn't feel adequate I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I knew enough. And that, I've still struggled with that some over time. But what I love is that we're learning that it doesn't have to quite be as complicated. So, Andy, I'd love to hear from you historically, prior to this, when you think of discipling somebody, what kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in church, discipleship is definitely something that's a familiar concept to me.
Because it wasn't to me. I'm going to be honest with you.
Discipleship wasn't. Yeah,
I grew up in church, and I'm not sure I even knew what discipleship was. I knew what coming to church was.
I think it was a familiar term.
Okay, yeah,
is a familiar term, but practically, I think there's just so many ways it got played out. I think for me, it felt a little unattainable.
Right.
Like I never really could envision myself being someone who was adequately discipling somebody else.
Right.
Because the person that was discipling me just felt so far ahead of where I was, and so there's a part of me that it felt a little unattainable. Or like I had to feel like, I felt like if I was going to be someone that was going to disciple somebody else, I needed to have all the answers, or, kind of like you said, it's a little, unattainable, or it felt
intimidating.
That's why I like this conversation a lot.
Yeah.
And this resonates with me so much. And so that's why I love this idea of humble guide. And
Julie, what about you historically? When you have thought about discipleship, what comes to mind?
Well, I'm with Andy as far as a list of things that you need to do, or we want those people that we are discipling to check this list off, rather than just living.
Did they
it out
read
on
everything?
Daily.
Do they have a journal on everything?
Yeah.
Practically, I think what I would think about is you've got one person sitting at a table with, 6 to 10 other guys.
That's a big D group.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or just historically, this is what, and you're walking through the word, and you're breaking scripture down. But practically, that's what discipleship, if I was to define it, that's what discipleship looked like. But again, that's why I like this conversation, because it just opens discipleship up in a lot of different ways.
So a question that Pastor asked yesterday was this, and this is, for me, this makes it less intimidating when you ask yourself this question: who am I helping take one step closer to Jesus? Like, that is so much. That feels so much more obtainable. I feel like I can do that. I feel like I don't have to have all the answers. And being a humble guide, you're not necessarily an expert, but you're inviting somebody on this journey with you. So how does a humble guide, how does that feel different than maybe what we have thought about discipleship in the past?
I think one thing is we often think that it is more like maybe a program.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than
for
a lifestyle.
For people who don't work at a church staff, you say program. Explain that.
It's something that we come to church and do.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're taught how to do it.
Right.
And in our minds, maybe that's what it's looked like, rather than we can be disciple people doing whatever we're doing.
Exactly right.
Being intentional in a conversation at the ball field while my grandchildren are playing ball, you know what I'm saying? And I'm introduced to somebody. I can be intentional being a disciple because I'm living on mission. And I think that's what makes it. If we're living on mission, we're thinking about it as we go about.
Yeah, what I love about these traits of a disciple we've been talking about in this series, it feels like they're almost compounding up to the next thing. So we talked about being a spirit-led follower. Well, if you're a spirit-led follower, then we talked about being an intentional friend. If you're those two things, chances are you're going to be a humble guide.
Absolutely.
Like, it's going to kind of, not naturally, but intentionally happen if you're those two things before it. And I think, like, it's Julie.
Well, I was just going to say,
you got some gold.
The very word humble.
Right.
You don't even know you're doing it.
Right.
You're just living out your God-given calling.
That's good.
And so that's just who you are. And you're not thinking about, I'm going to go and help this person. No, I'm just doing it.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you said that. So I know I used an exercise illustration last week, but that's just a new thing in my life. Okay. So when I first started exercising, when I went to the gym, I saw the guys who were like, look like Pastor Robbie. I'm just going to say they were just like jacked over there. And I'm like, man, they could probably tell me everything I need to know, but I was so intimidated to approach them because they felt so much further down the road than I am. But then there was somebody who's just a little bit further on the journey to me that helped me get going and helped me get started. And they were very approachable. They weren't arrogant, or I'm not saying any of those guys were arrogant. They're actually awesome guys. Now I got to meet them, but they were just one step ahead of me, and they helped me get going. And I feel like spiritually, we have an opportunity to do the same thing. We don't have all the answers. We don't have it all figured out. We're not, meeting you and treating you like a project. And hey, I'm closer to Jesus than you are, therefore I'm going to step into your life. No, we're just loving you and doing life with you and being a guide along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the Robbie said this yesterday is one of the biggest tools for discipleship, being a humble God, is time.
Right.
And I think someone who is willing to take time, I think that's probably the most valuable thing that we can give to someone.
Yep.
And so as I think about someone who's discipling or being a humble guide, it's like, this is going to take time. And so when I look back at my life, some of the most influential people are influential because they gave me their time.
That's right. That's good.
And so,
yeah, that's so
this is
good.
part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday, Pastor spent a lot of time talking about parents and the role of parents in the home, being the chief disciple makers. I love that conversation. I'm a little intimidated by that conversation.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's just such a high responsibility on me as a dad. Andy, I know you're a dad. About to be a dad of 3, by the way. Congrats, Andy Williams.
Little boy.
Little boy.
Yeah, Julie's
so
a mom of 2 and about 15 grandkids.
Yeah, well, not quite 15. A lot of boys.
No, right? But we were just talking through before the camera started rolling. Man, there are things in life that we have to walk our kids through. And now I view that not just as being a parent, but being a humble guide. Mm-hmm. So my kids right now are obsessed with saying cuss words. I'm just being honest with you. You got the pastor's kid that you got to, other people don't want their kids around. But
are they getting that from you?
No, they get it from, they've been hanging out with Selah. But
my daughter. That's probably true.
No, but they are like parrots. You know what I'm saying? Like they hear it and they have to say it. And Asher is like, I just have to say it. I'm like, son, you don't have to say it, but can I spell it? I'm like, no. So anyways, so that's just one of the many things we're walking through in the Bolton household. But now I see these situations as I'm not just parenting my kids. I'm not just disciplining my kids. I'm guiding my kids. I'm guiding them to be the men of God that I want them to be one day.
Yeah.
So, and Jenny, we talk about this all the time, like, the way I respond to things, the way I talk to her, all these things is how they will talk to their future spouse one day.
Yeah.
The way I value the word is how they will value the word. There's all these things to it.
Yeah.
They ask me hard questions
Absolutely.
that I don't always know the answers to.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about how we help our kids navigate things. And sometimes we step in, sometimes we let them figure it out for themselves. So, I just think as a parent that I like this lens of being a humble guide.
Yeah.
And I don't have all the answers, son, but let's figure this out together. Let's do this together.
And too, I think that's taking responsibility of discipling your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to look like you. Now granted, like I was challenged yesterday of like, hey, I do need to sit down with, Selah and walk her through, scripture and stuff like that. But it's like in the everyday little things.
Right. Oh yeah.
Decision making, or when we're having to make an adjustment.
Right.
Something's not going well and you're like, hey, we got to call this out.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think about is more than I'm teaching her a lesson for in that moment, what I'm also doing is I'm giving her a framework for how she's also going to deal with issues down the road.
Right. Yeah. That's
and so those are great opportunities, and that's discipleship. That's discipling. And I think that's where this unattainable, I can't be a disciple, or I can't be the one who disciples my kids. Those are like the perfect moments.
Yeah. Okay. Something that freed me up was when Pastor's talking about, he talked about all the times he tried to intentionally sit down with the boys and go through this. Yeah. And as he's saying all the things, I'm like, okay, I've experienced every bit of that, every bit of the chaos that comes along with that. But then it's just the normal rhythms and conversations of life. Yeah. It's not necessarily a program, something that you come to church to do, something I intentionally carve out time to do, but it's just an intentional way of life with my boys that is being that humble guide. Yeah. Julie, I'd love to hear from you because Andy and I are in the thick of this.
Yeah.
You have grown kids.
I do. And boy, I did so many things wrong in raising my kids. One of the things I
Let me write
would
this
have
down.
loved to have done better is helping them navigate through some situations that probably I could have helped them
Yeah.
rather than just tossing them out there to do it on their own. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I think I thought this humble guide, they're watching and they're listening to what you say, whether you think it or not. Let me encourage y'all in that.
Right. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, because they are hearing it and they are absorbing what they're seeing you do and say. And
Right.
so, although sometimes we think as parents we're not making any headway,
You're right.
it sometimes takes years.
Well, I mean, we know that some things are taught
That's
in
right.
life, some things are caught.
That's right.
And, we'll be very intentional to teach the right things, but they're going to catch all the bad things.
Well, that's
just
exactly right.
naturally.
And that's why it's critical that we do those things that we know we want them to catch. Like
Right.
when we do something wrong or say something wrong, we
Apologizing.
apologize.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That we're vulnerable
huge.
before them, to let
Yeah.
them know, Mom messed up or Dad
Yeah.
messed up along the way,
Yeah.
and letting them see that side. Coming back around and
Yeah.
having a conversation about that. I missed way more opportunities than I had, than I took advantage of, I
Yeah.
think, along the way.
Something, in the Bible, Pastor talked about how if there's a dad in the home, the dad's the chief disciple maker. I can just tell you, in my home, Jenny is way more wired to think this way than I am. So I would encourage, it's a reminder to myself, I encourage you, this is a partnership. You know what I'm saying? Like partner, if you have a spouse, partner with your spouse to do this, because Jenny brings so much to the table that I don't even naturally think of that makes our family so much better when it comes to spiritual things.
Let me point out with that, because Pastor did it yesterday and I want to do it again, and that's to single moms or single
Oh,
dads
yes,
that are
please.
parenting,
Yeah.
how important you are. And I don't know because I haven't been there, but it wears you out.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage you that those times when you think you're not doing it, God sees and God
Yeah.
knows that you're trying to
Yeah.
do it well
Yeah.
and hang in there.
Yeah, I grew up in a divorce home, and looking back, my dad did the best he could when I was with him. My mom did the best she could when I was with her, and even though they weren't together, it was this really neat partnership, whether they knew they were doing it or not. You know what I'm saying? So you may be raising kids in the same environment right now. You do just what you can do, and hopefully the other half is doing what they can do as well. But I'm encouraged because we have some single moms that are doing life with Jenny, and man, they are crushing it. Like they are, and they're boy moms, so that's how we're all kind of connected with the chaos of boys. But they are doing a great job loving their boys, pointing them to Jesus. I'm just so encouraged by watching these moms do this, and I know that there's times where they're tired and they're worn out, and man, it sure would be nice to have Dad here to help navigate some of this stuff. But they got a village. They've created a village. They are not only a humble guide for their boys, but they have humble guides in their life as well who are helping them walk through things.
And the beauty of that is the church, the body of Christ,
Yeah.
because as a single parent, that's what we're here for.
Right.
There are people that lead them in their groups or whatever that
Yeah.
if they don't have a dad in the home or they don't have it, then they can get that
Yeah.
here. And so lean into that because that's what we're all about.
Yeah. Okay. I want to take a second. I want to brag on my wife's discipleship group. Okay. So historically, when Jenny has done a discipleship group, it has been Hear Journal, F260. We're going to meet for an hour and a half. I'm like, babe, that hour and a half turned into 3 hours. You got to come home. You know what I'm saying? But
I got a lot of words.
I know, but it has to check off all these boxes.
Yep.
And Jenny started a new discipleship group at the beginning of the year, and it wasn't checking all the boxes at first. And at first, she was struggling with, oh man, we're not. She wasn't using this lingo, but we're not checking all the boxes, or we're not being successful.
Yeah.
But now we're walking through this series, and I'm seeing spirit-led follower. I'm learning about being an intentional friend. I'm learning about being a humble guide. And I'm like, it's checking all those
There you
boxes.
go.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
it is checking all those things, and it is real, and they are honest. And I tell you, we had something intense this past weekend, something Jenny had to get ready for, and we needed some extra hands. And next thing I know, Jenny's whole D group is there pitching in. And it was just so cool seeing them do life together. Mm-hmm. So yes, they're studying God's word. Yes, they're praying together and they're encouraging each other, but they're just doing life together. And it's so much more fruitful than just checking all the boxes and coming to the program.
And I think that's key with discipleship is it's the everyday part of our mission statement of trying to figure out ways to where it's not just something that happens on a Tuesday night,
right?
You know, or on a Sunday morning,
right?
But it's something that is tangible, you know, every single day of the week, where it's consistent, it's daily, and I think that's the trap that we fall into. The church is it's a time on the calendar, which I think is necessary, but it's a time on the calendar and it checks these 4 boxes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what God is wanting us to do, he's wanting to check boxes that aren't on the list.
Changing the scorecard a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think that is freeing. It's also really refreshing too.
Right.
And that's what I love about this Humble Guide conversation is it's a refreshing take on discipleship.
Yeah.
And so
now it's really easy for us to think about our kids. Okay, that's what we talked a lot about yesterday. If you got kids in the home, they are your life, you know, and for good reason. But let's talk about other people who may be in our life. How can somebody be a humble guide to maybe a coworker or maybe a friend they play golf with or whoever that may be? What are some practical things that somebody could do?
Yeah. I know. I think about my wife, Kristen. She's works in the hospital, and for her, it's a secular situation. It's not a church, not a staff. You know, a church staff. I mean, she's working in the thick of it, and the people around her may or may not be believers.
Right.
And I think that there are so many situations and so many moments where God has put her in a position to speak truth, you know, to be an encouragement. Someone's dealing with something at home and they don't really have a framework or a really good construct to work from. They're just kind of coasting and trying to figure life out. And I think part of being a humble guide is going back to giving people time. What does it look like for Kristen in that moment to be the voice of God in someone's life?
Yeah. And
that could, who knows how God may use that. And so, I think that's a way of seeing the situation and going, okay, does God have a word for this? You know, can I speak into this? You know, and be a humble God to my friend, to my coworker.
It's good.
I think about my neighbors because we have an opportunity to speak into them and to love them and them love us back, and yet they're not getting in the car and going to church every Sunday. I don't know where they stand in relationship. We're just trying to build those relationships to love them and have them over for dinner just to start the conversation. So I think that's an opportunity. I was thinking about, as we've talked about this, Jesus is, as he had his disciples, I mean, he just did life with them. He talked fishing if he needed to talk fishing. He, wherever he was, whatever he was doing, he was pouring into those guys and loving them right where they were. He didn't expect them to be something that they were not. He knew who they were. He knew everything about them. And yet he just loved them where they were.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up Jesus. Here's what I love about Jesus. Well, I love a lot of things about Jesus, but when you think about Jesus and who he discipled, he had 12. And at times, he spent time with even smaller groups than that. I fall into the trap of feeling like I have to be everything to everybody. And I've just learned I just can't. I cannot be everything to everybody, no matter how much I want to. So I want to free you up a little bit. And I hope you guys, if you disagree, you're totally welcome to disagree. But I want to free you up by saying, you may not be able to do what you want to do for everybody, but that doesn't mean that you don't do it for those that you can. Okay, so God may be putting a couple people in your life who you can be this humble guide for, who you can give your time, who you can help walk through, but you may not be able to do it for everybody, and that's okay. It's okay. So I'd love to consider who is it God has put in your place or is crossing your path with, who you can be that humble guide for. So, when we think about neighbors, that may be, for me, that's going to be creeping into Force for Good, which we're going to talk about next week, because God has I promise you, it is ordained by the Lord that he has placed us in the neighborhood we're in, the neighborhood you're in, and I have the neighbors I have, and, some love Jesus, some don't, and it's a great opportunity. That may be a lot of Force for Good, but there may be people in your life who believe in Jesus, they've put their trust in Jesus, and they're new believers, and they don't know what's next. And you're not going to have all the answers, but again, you can just help them take one step closer to Jesus. So,
That's good.
Yeah.
Y'all got any more thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one more thought that there's a lot of like we're encouraging you to be a humble God, but you may be thinking to yourself, I need that.
Okay, that's good.
Good.
And I think I heard I can't remember the person. I just remember the clip of.
Was it good? It was probably me.
Yeah, it was you. It was like one of those street
Humble
interviews.
God, you are.
Like those
Humble.
street interviews, like where a guy just like goes up to a random guy
Yeah.
and asks like a random question. And anyways, he's talking to this very successful businessman.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, do you have any advice for someone that's, wanting to do what you're doing? Blah 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 blah." And the guy said, "Just ask." Like, you got a lot of guys, you got a lot of people.
Good.
Like, humble yourself. Humble
Right.
yourself and go, hey, I'm yes, I think I can be a humble guy, but I actually need.
Right.
And I would say, man, have the courage to go up to someone that you look up to, or that has played a powerful role and say, hey, I need someone that I can just bounce things off of.
Yeah.
When I'm having trouble at the house,
Yeah.
when I'm having trouble raising the kids,
Yeah.
working through, can you be that voice in my life, that I can, and so I would just say, yes, be a humble God, but you may need that person in your life.
Yeah.
So good. And you have to be humble to ask.
You got to be humble
Yeah.
to ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't remember who gave me this advice, but I think if you know the person well, you could probably come up and have that exact conversation with
Oh,
them.
yeah.
If maybe you admire them, you look up to them, man, they're somebody who could invest in you.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't know them too well. Somebody gave me this advice. Maybe don't walk up to them and say, "Hey, will you mentor me?" That sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
But if you ask them to coffee, "Hey, can I take you to coffee? I just got a couple questions.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask about X, Y, Z."
Absolutely.
If somebody that I did not know came up to me right now and said, "Hey, will you mentor me?" I'd be like, man, let's get, I don't know. I
Can
don't
you
know.
disciple me?
But yeah, exactly. But if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Andrew, I would love to take you to coffee. I just got a couple questions
Yeah.
about raising boys." Oh yeah, I'm down. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that may be a good way
Absolutely.
to approach somebody and just kind of start that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, you got any last thoughts?
No, that's good. Y'all were, that's so good.
We did good, y'all. Man,
good.
come on.
Come on.
How are you doing today, Julie?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Andrew?
That's what she said she hates. That's what she said she hates about hosting with me. Oh, man. All right. Well, hey, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Breakdown Live. This is fun doing it live. I enjoyed this. So as we close, I want to encourage you. Who in your life can you be a humble guy to? Who is it that you can help take one step closer to Jesus? It may be your kids. If that's the case, think about how you can just do it in the normal rhythm and flow of life. It may be a friend or a coworker. It's somebody that knows Jesus, but you're just one step ahead of them. And then also, I love what Andy brought up. Do you need to ask somebody to speak into your life? I think that is a great tip, and that's a lot of wisdom there, believe it or not, from Andy Williams. So anyways, thank you guys so much for joining us on this week's episode of The Breakdown, and we'll see you next Monday.
Come on.